Hey there, YouTubers. This is Kevin from the Survivor Super Fun Time Show. And today we got an awesome recap of episode 3 of Survivor 47. And today, it's actually a special day. I'm actually wearing my Liz Wilcox glasses in honor of Lizzie Wilcox. We're going to be talking about some of the biggest things that happened in the episode. Rather than recap everything that went on, we're just going to talk about some of the main highlights of, I think, what affected what ultimately happened in the game, the big results. Some of the mechanical changes in the episode that I'm not very much excited about. Maybe a little bit of an outlook moving forward into the game. Seeing some of the characters that we haven't got to see too much that really could project their long-term viability in the game. So it's going to be really exciting to talk about that a little bit more. But before we get into that, make sure you hit the subscribe button. I would appreciate if you would help grow this channel, the Survivor Super Fun Time Show. This is a great time making videos, and I want to continue making them more for you and a larger audience. So getting into the episode itself, it starts off with basically everyone celebrating after the Tuku vote. I mean, everyone except for Kyle for the most part, because Kyle, poor sweet dear baby Kyle, was left out of the vote. His buddy, TK, totally out of the game. I mean, I didn't really feel too bad about it for Kyle because I don't really know Kyle all that well. But in episode 3, I learned a ton about Kyle. And you know what I learned? I love Kyle. That's what I learned. I think he's great. And he seems like he's strategic, and I didn't necessarily know if that was going to be the case. I didn't know if he was just some kind of like really nice like guy who's traveled around, seen stuff, but doesn't really have a game to speak of. No, it looks like there's some serious juice behind those eyes, and I love it. To the point where he actually volunteers to go on the journey that happens on later on in the episode. And I'll touch on that a little bit later because there's so many layers to what happens in that journey that I need to talk about personally. But the fact that he threw his hat in the ring, having an idea that he was at the bottom of Tuku, pretty big deal. And in the dynamic of Tuku, I mean, Caroline and Sue, they looked like they were probably going to be on the bottom, but after the vote, not so much the case. They're I don't know if they're in the driver's seat, but they're near the driver's seat, knee deep in the passenger seat, maybe. One of my favorite sequences right away is Gabe doing his like little confessional where he's like, listen, I saw Survivor 46. I'm not going home with an idol in my pocket, okay? And then they do a montage of just clowns from Survivor 46. You know, Jem, Tiffany, Hunter, Venus, Q, all of them leave with idols in their pocket. Hilarious, and I'm glad that Gabe gave them the opportunity to do that little sequence of all these people in Survivor 46 that did not play their idols, and it was really fun. Now moving over to the Gata tribe, it's really fun to look into them because I think they have maybe the best cast of characters on the show. They have Andy who had like a meltdown, Sam who's this cool, affable, alpha kind of guy. You have Anika, who's like a total ball buster, but incredibly smart. And Sierra's really fun, really great personality. Rachel, the rice stealer. I mean, basically, it's a really fun tribe. But what instead we got was, some of the girls' backs hurt. So therefore, we're going to make a whole new shelter. And Sam is actually pretty frustrated with the whole scenario. Where like Anika's like, no, we're going to do it this way. Sam's like, we're going to do it this way. And they're butting heads, which more or less I expected. It's been telegraphed that Sam wants to get rid of Anika. It's only going to be natural. It's like when King Kong looked at Godzilla initially. They're going to fight. You got some alphas going at each other. Oh, and by the way, Sam doesn't know what an heirloom tomato is or broccolini. Just a heads up, I have no idea what those things are either. But honestly, most of the other items that he said he's never had, I've never had either. So actually, I felt a lot closer to Sam in that scene. Now, speaking of the conflict from Gata, let's go over to Lavo. Lavo has their own conflict, and that really centered around Rome and Aysha. Rome and Aysha apparently do not like each other at all. And because Aysha does not like Rome, she also can't like Genevieve, because you would never know it from the edit, because we don't know anything about Genevieve according to the edit. Genevieve and Rome are super, super tight, so Aysha can't make a connection there. But Sol, who Aysha is really connected to, also seemingly really does not like Rome at all. So it was interesting to see them kind of butting heads, especially over the fishing gear stuff, where Rome's like, listen, I'm going to break the fishing record, which I'm sure Rupert Boneham is at home right now shaking his fist going, oh, no, you won't. You won't take my record. I think what Rome's really into, I think he's into being the center of attention. I think he wants it to be known that he's the expert at pretty much everything, even when he's not. However, he is a talented guy. He's a smart guy. He seems to know a lot of things, and he's got mega confidence, which to some degree has been paying off in the game. One of the biggest things that happens is they have to have a journey. And as soon as he goes on the journey, he starts spilling all this tea about Lavo. Some of it fake, a lot of it real though. They go on the journey and they find out you have to go on 3 separate paths. And at the end of each one of those paths, there is a scroll that says, hey, you are going to play a game. You're going to reach in this bag. There are 3 outcomes. The first time you reach in, you're either going to get a lose your vote or you're going to get an advantage in the game. If the first time you pull it out, you lose your vote, that means you can either do one of 2 things. You can pull again and possibly lose a vote again, or you can get the advantage. I have to say, though, I thought it was total bullshit that they had to play the game. I admit in the past when we've had these journeys, it makes sense to send them there and go like, hey, if you want to risk your vote, you may get an advantage. In this scenario, they did not get that option, and I did not think that was very fair. Because Survivor at its core, I'm going to say this over and over again until I'm blue in the face, major cores of the game is that no matter what you have in this game, whether you have food, whether you have clothes, whether you have immunity, you have your vote. And Jeffrey Probst is doing everything he can to get rid of that vote. And I really don't like it. I really don't like it. It's one thing to risk it, knowing that you're going to risk it, to get something bigger, to try to upgrade your vote. No matter what, 3 people were going to risk their vote on that journey. There was no option not to. It was not like a beware advantage where you could put it back down. Or some of the other journeys in the past where you could just be like, you know what, I'm not going to play today. Instead, every single one of them did it. And what intrigued me was Anika and Kyle actually lost their votes on the first pull. Now, Rome, luckily, ended up getting the power in the game where he got to steal a vote. So he can steal a vote from any one player. Rome. However, Anika and Kyle lost their votes the first time, and they refused to go the second time. And part of me is like, okay, playing it safe. I get it, especially for Anika. With Kyle, if Kyle already thinks he's on the bottom, you might as well risk it and go for the steal vote. I was just really surprised by Kyle because I figured he would want to do everything he can to have as many votes as he could for the next tribal council, considering it looks like he was on the bottom. But the problem is, as a viewer, to me, it's very clear Kyle's on the bottom. Anika's probably going to be out of the game if Gata loses because Sam, Sierra, and Andy seem to be forming some kind of relationship. So why wouldn't she do that? And Rome, thankfully, didn't have to do that. But I will tell you this. If Rome ended up putting his hand in there and losing his vote, I think he would have done it twice. Because that's the kind of player Rome is. He's a little bit chaotic, he's risky, but he's also fairly talented, and I can't say he's not strategic. He's not a good liar, as we found out from Soul's interaction with him, but he does risk it for the biscuit, and you know what? It's been paying off for him. He's got an idol and a steal a vote, all because of his work that he's put into it, and a little bit of luck, no question. If anyone other than Rome had gotten that idol at the Lavo camp, the game and the vote for episode 3 would have been completely different. Rome is forthright with Teeny, and Teeny seems to be running this game at this point, which is super wild, but it's true. And obviously that mixes up the dynamics of what's going to happen at Tribal Council. But who's going to go to Tribal Council? And it ended up being Lavo. They did a challenge, which I have to say, give props to Andy. He survives one Tribal Council, and all of a sudden he thinks he's like this titan. I love it. I love it for him, because I think he is. I think he's great. It's just he needs that little bit of confidence, and he's getting it. He botched the challenge, but he's getting the confidence, and that's important. A lot of people kind of screwed up the challenge, though. Lavo blew it for the most part, to the point where I was like, wait, is it possible they threw the challenge? Because this is not looking good. But Lavo loses, so it creates an issue for everyone, because Teeny, who's kind of the mastermind at the moment, knows that Rome has an idol and a steal a vote. And with that information, she's got to figure out, how do we best navigate this? Because Keyshawn was kind of locked in as her number 1. But Aysha and Soul are also people that were kind of part of that 4 that really talks a lot of crap about Rome, and by extension, Genevieve. And it really comes down to this. Teeny said, all right, so Rome is going to play the idol probably for himself or Genevieve. And I'm not certain which one it's going to be. So the safest plan to keep you in the game, Aysha, is to get rid of Soul. The problem is Aysha doesn't want to do that. Aysha, Soul's her guy, right? So she doesn't want to get rid of him. So instead of doing that certain plan, she instead would rather roll the dice at voting out Genevieve, because she's pretty certain that Rome is going to use the idol on himself. So they go to Tribal Council, they have their back and forth for a good little while, and Aysha makes a proclamation. She says, the person who said they will vote with me, I hope they stick to that, because it could get rid of me or allies. When all the votes are read, Aysha ends up getting the most votes, and the RHAP has a podcast, YouTuber, podcaster, whatever you want to call her, gets booted off that island, and she's out of here. She is the 3rd one booted out of the game. I admit, I'm totally of 2 minds about Aysha being voted out. The reason why, is because I think Aysha is an excellent player. I think she's got a lot of juice. I think she seems incredibly nice and wonderful. I would love to know her myself. She'd be great. However, I think that her being a Rob Has a podcaster overhyped her in the fandom. I don't, straight up, I've never seen her do anything. I've never seen any of her content for Rob Has a Podcast. And admittedly, I don't really even watch Rob Has a Podcast. I do watch Talking with T-Bird on the Rob Has a Podcast network because T-Bird is lovely and I love hearing from old Survivor players. But I've never seen Aysha's content, so I never had that connection to her specifically. However, a lot of people did. I was bummed for their sake that they lost, a favorite. However, this just wasn't her game. Aysha just lost. It happens. There's a whole list of players that were voted out too early that I think potentially could have won the game. Helen from 44, Justine Brennan from 43. Like, there's a whole slew of pre-mergers that I think could have absolutely won the game, and it just didn't work out. And H is just one of them, and that's okay. And what's next for Gata? Like I said, I think there's a target painted on Anika's forehead at this point. I think Sam's going to do whatever he can to get rid of her, and I think he probably will. I mean, it's possible, though, that Gata just wins every challenge from here on out, and around Mergatory is when Anika ends up biting the dust. I don't know. That's just how I'm guessing and seeing things play out a little bit. And real quick, segment for the episode, I'm going to do the Survivor Super Fun Player of the Week, and I think it's fair to say that the Survivor Super Fun Player of the Week, love him or hate him, is Rome, baby! Because Rome, not only was he entertaining on the episode, whether he's annoying out on the island, don't know. Not my thing. Aysha certainly thinks so. But however, as a viewer, so fun. Oh my god. Seeing him do the fish thing and then dance and bring back like tiny little goldfish back on the spear and act like it was bringing back giant groupers or eels and stuff, I think that's hilarious. I think his loud personality is really fun for TV. The Survivor Super Fun Player of the Week, definitely, you get the W this week, Rome. But that, my friends, is going to do it for the episode. What did you think of this episode? What did you think about Jeff making the players risk their vote in order to get some kind of an advantage? Do you think it's fair that Jeff continues to do that? Or do you think that it is a good, clean piece of innovation in the game? Let me know down below in the comment section. I would love to hear from you. That's going to do it. I hope you have an amazing day, everyone. You take care. Goodbye. And goodbye.